Hey, Tom George, ELD.
Hi, I'm Sue Parrish, Early Learning Hub Manager, ELD. Christy Collins, Early Learning Hub of Lynn, Benton, and Lincoln Counties.
David Mandel.
Sherry Saganez, Early Learning Division.
Catherine Arena with DHS. Augusta Green, Portland State University.
Alicia Meow at ELD. I'm a postdoc.
Bobby Bremer, Early Learning Council. I have to figure out who I am at this. Okay, so Tom has the goals for the meeting. We're going to keep working on the library and review. Tom has worked with numerous people between meetings, as he always does, so that the questions that were in the minutes, hopefully we'll have answers to some of them at least, and then review the measures, and then we're going to begin the process of identifying the questions, everything that we need to do to move us toward measure selection. So, Tom, you want to take us through or decide, or you know who is doing tasks in between? And,
Sure, I can just give a couple quick updates. I don't know what I did last time and what's an update this time. I heard back from Megan Bolton in housing. She says they do calculate a severe rent burden for young families with children.
yay, that's good.
She says, oh, it might need to be updated. I'm like, you know, you guys have a set source, you do the analysis, and you might be able to commit to giving us data on an annual basis. We're good to go. That part I haven't heard back yet. I haven't heard okay, but yeah, that's a good start.
Yeah, because rent burden, the severe rent burden is the one that when they did the family impact seminar, the George from University of Michigan, anyway, shared the research that showed that has as big a impact on child outcomes as mother's education, which is huge. Ouch. Yeah. So getting that is a really valuable. Okay.
Don't know if we talked about this last time. Remember we were deciding regarding ELC. We had 12 measures we wanted to whittle down to more cohesive set. I think we would like to have 2 we talked about, and the recommendation from ELC was, well, if you have to pick 2, go with the social emotional skills domain. It seems to be most relevant. It's the hottest topic now. So if we want 2, we can expand it. If we want more than that, we can just make a decision to go social emotional.
Oh.
And the developmental screening one that's there, that's one, am I correct, that Colleen, by about 2020 or 2022 or something, we're going to have hopefully a measure of how many of them are the follow-up of a developmental screening, but are we recommending at this point that we just put in the percentage who were screened by 36 months?
So it's not, just to clarify, it's not by 36 months because that's always confusing to people, but it's looking at kids and whether they were screened in the first 3 years of life. So 1-year-olds, whether they were screened, 2-year-olds, whether they were screened, and 3-year-olds, whether they were screened. So I think that's an important primary measure. Yeah, so I would recommend you keep that in, and then it'll be a subset, a sample that we would be looking at follow-up developmental screening based on EHR reported data for publicly insured children. Tom, in terms of the early learning, and I know this meeting keeps conflicting with all my other meetings. I apologize that I keep having to miss, but have you looked at the validity? We do a lot of deep work with EI, as you know. And so you're talking about the domain of social emotional, assessment of social emotional and tracking of social emotional?
Yeah, they have their, they have a set of federal metrics, or they produce annual data. And they have one of their measures is the percentage of kids who show significant gains. Yeah, and there were 3 domains.
Yep.
That was,
I think in terms of statewide priority, I don't think it's what people think it is, if that's what it makes, in terms of what's being entered and what people think is the goal. And then, there's just a lot of kids with social emotional delays that's not necessarily the best place to refer. And so that might just be a good conversation to have, just because I'm worried that it's missing actually kids with social emotional delays that don't even get in to EI because they wouldn't even be eligible. So it's only looking at, of those kids who get into early intervention, whether they improved on social emotional skills.
okay, so Bruce came to a meeting a couple months ago and walked us through, and I mean that all of his data will be restricted to the children who get services, but do you know of a data source that we could use for social emotional that was making progress on social emotional that's broader than EI?
No, like that's what I'm just trying to say. I think it's like really important it is like just in our follow-up to developmental screening pathway, if a kid is identified on like problem solving, personal, social, we're not even telling them to go to early intervention. We're telling them to go to a different set of resources.
Right. But I think that was part of what we sort of talked about for the principles of the intermediary measures, is that not all the intermediate measures would necessarily capture full population, that there might be some that capture at least a portion of the population that's tied to a specific program.
Yeah, so I was just, when Tom was talking about picking 2, to me, in terms of that objective, young children with social emotional development healthcare identified early and support, I guess what I was curious is, why don't we have the percentage of kids who are referred to EI that EI is able to evaluate? And then of those, how many are eligible? Like, why did you guys bump that out? Because it seems like you're going very myopic to a group of kids who happen to be eligible, and of those eligible, whether they're having their social emotional skills. And so that, I just wanted to understand that a little bit better, because it seems to be missing a really important middle point. And then I do think in the future, not now, that there is a focus in CCO 2.0 around looking at receipt of services, 0 to 5 behavioral health services, and that's a metric we considered in terms of hacker. And I think that actually could be a better population estimate of how many kids identified with social emotional delays are getting to appropriate services.
And I think we didn't put that one in the library because I guess based on the hacker presentation, that felt like that was not yet a current measure, that was something to be developed that we could look at once it had been developed.
The attestation metric is not yet a current metric in terms of a CCO level metric. Tracking the number of children 0 to 5 getting behavioral health services could be a measure tracked now. That's not an incentive metric, but it could be a population-based metric. That makes sense?
Well, but somebody, I mean, the way this dashboard is going to be built, somebody has to be tracked and agreed.
Yeah.
And you think that's possible?
I know it's possible because we had to present the data for the state to consider. And given that it got identified as a state level priority, I think it's a good, robust conversation to have, because it may likely be a component of the attestation, but regardless, there could be a conversation to talk about it as a priority area. And I think it might address some of the gap. And then again, for the EI ones, what you're missing is the biggest drop off we have of children who have needs identified early and are supported isn't represented in this data. So that's where I was curious about that. And so maybe I can just offline have a conversation about that in terms of like a deep, now I know ODE, ED, data well. And so maybe I could just revisit that one piece one more time.
Right. And I think we're at a stage that if there are additional potential measures to add to the library to look at this point, that would be great. So if there are some specific suggestions of measures, that would be great to put that into the mix.
Yep, and I even know how you would do numerator, denominator, and EC web, so I'd be happy to share.
Okay.
That's great. Good. Okay. So, for objective 5, we're going to be adding something to look at. And on developmental screening, instead of by 36 months, we're looking at it as by 1, by 2, by 3 years.
Yeah, so the way we describe it is developmental screening in the first 3 years of life. If you want to make it easy, you could do %.
Okay.
Okay. 3 different. It's the same measure we've been using the whole time. Yeah.
Okay, great. All right, Tom, what's the next one?
Okay. Rather than skipping around in our library, I think just go to the handout, which has PRAM measures. It's a side-by-side that was left for our last meeting, comparable measures of the PRAM 2 and the current NCS measures. Why don't we just go in order that it's on the handout? Exclusive breastfeeding.
People on the phone, do you have this material?
It was emailed. I emailed it to everybody, and I'm showing it on the Go. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep, I've got it. Thanks for asking.
So the PRAMS 2, how old was your 2-year-old the first time he or she drank liquids other than breast milk? Compared to how old was a child when he or she completely stopped breastfeeding or being fed breast milk? So maybe, Beth, do you think this is the time to bring up the PRAMS 3?
If you want to.
I was going to save it till the end. The PRAMS 2 is being revised into the PRAMS 3, so it's now going to occur at age 3. In addition to the time, the change in the age, there is a complete review of all the items of the PRAMS. And I just bring this up here, and we were going to have our initial meeting with the group. We haven't been able to schedule that yet. Whether, say we like the way it's worded on NSCH, can we use that wording and put it into the PRAMS 3 if we like that better? And so whether that's a possibility yet, unfortunately, I don't have a set answer, but if you like the way things are worded.
So the meeting you're referencing is with OHA? You are going to meet with OHA?
Yes, Beth and I and Shannon, I think. And who else was going to? Alicia, I was going to include you. Did I do?
Great.
Yes.
Okay, I think a doodle poll's coming out.
Hey, Tom, is the NSETch question, does it have a filter before that? Because right now, because it's double-barreled, we don't really understand the, like, I don't know about the validity of the answer. So is there a filter question before it of was your child breastfed or not?
Probably. I should, yeah.
I would just
some of those.
There's some items in the NSETch that don't have a filter. I used to work on CAMI and we used to develop the NSETch items. And what we found is that the wrong filter is used, you don't actually get reliable results. And so that's just one concern I have with B5, is if there's not a filter, I'm concerned about what we would do with the answer.
Can you explain what the filter is?
Well, right now, if your child wasn't breastfed, how do you answer that question?
Thank you. Okay.
I mean, the biggest the obvious advantage to using the national survey is that then we can compare to national statistics. But on the other hand, PRAMS, I assume, has some historical data. They've been tracking that. I've been doing that PRAMS survey for a while. Although my understanding is that the PRAMS 2 doesn't happen all the time because it's come and gone depending on funding.
The other potential benefit, though, is that the sampling of the PRAMS is very different than the sampling of the NSETch, and you might actually get a different level of sensitivity and specificity that you may want in a PRAMS if it's invested in over an NSETch, which is a pretty small sample for 0 to 5 that then is just weighted.
I think the question though is should we suggest to OHA? I think this is a question, right, Tom? Should we suggest to OHA that they change the language in their PRAMS 3 survey to better reflect the NCH so that then there would be comparability, although the age range is different, so it's a little different. don't know if they'd be comparable if we only do 3-year-olds in Oregon and SCH does 0 to 5, some kind of stratification, I assume. Was that the question?
So that's what we want. So
I mean, we don't have to get into
the committee is which wording.
Right.
Okay.
Are you asking us now to weigh in on these questions, Tom?
Well, if you're leaning towards one or the other, I wouldn't say, you know, we're not going to sit here and wordsmith for the specific language for the params at this point. But just, I mean, if you have an initial reaction, I like, you know, the way this is worded better, clearer, or.
Well, I thought the NSCH measure was more clear. I mean, just in terms of language.
Yeah.
Whatever it's worth. Somebody, I'm sorry, someone just started to speak.
Yeah. Well, this is Emily. I was just curious if the question, so in the params 2, and maybe I'm not caught up quite yet, but in the params 2, it's assuming that the parent was exclusively breastfeeding the first 6 months. So I'm wondering if there's a previous question in the params that asks, did your child ever receive breast milk? Is that what would make
this is a longitudinal data set. So this is somebody who told them. So like
earlier,
you don't need that filter question because they know from everybody who filled out.
They already know. Yeah.
Had already completed pram.
They already received. Yeah. They already would have received. The filter
so
is they already know that they stopped receiving breast milk before 6 months.
No, what they would know is whether the child was breastfed. I'm not sure. When is the first prams administered?
For 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
So they know from that.
Second pram question is that they receive breast milk exclusively for the first 6 months. They know that already. Okay.
So this is Shannon. I would just add that I think the purpose of the question changes, and probably rightly so over time. So if in params the question is about whether or not the child was exclusively breastfed for some period of time, params 2 then asks, okay, when did that exclusive breastfeeding stop? And then params 3, a potential opportunity might be to use the NSCH measure to ask then, oh, okay, then when did it completely stop? So that would allow for kind of a developmental sequence that would track typical patterns.
Are they talking about replacing params 2 with params 3 or adding a survey?
Adding a survey, I thought. Wasn't it? They're adding a follow-up.
I thought they're taking out the 2.
Oh, okay.
That changes things.
And that's my guess.
That's what I thought too.
I don't know where they would have come up with the money for a whole new survey.
Yeah.
Nobody ever said you better be ready to pony up $500,000. So my guess is they're moving it to 3 to be more relevant. They think at age 3 to early learning.
But they won't need the filter because they'll still have the data from params.
Right.
So it will provide a filter.
Yeah, I should have included all the follow preceding questions as well.
What's the important thing to know? Right? What do we?
If we get down to the important thing, we can just suggest that language.
Is it how long they breastfed? Is it whether they did it exclusively only for 6 months?
Well, the second question gets at when did they stop?
Right. So that's duration of breastfeeding.
So what's the most important? And here's what I thought.
The OHA people would know the answer.
Yeah, I know Sarah Clinchman mentioned exclusive breastfeeding for 6 months is the key. Colleen, what do you think? Are you on mute or did we lose you?
Sorry, I'm having such issues. I was trying to pull up the whole battery of questions because it's not just one, and so I can't answer correctly because I need to look at like where it fits in the middle.
Does anybody know about the benefits of exclusive breastfeeding or
Well, the exclusive breastfeeding in the first 6 months, no, they don't recommend exclusive breastfeeding
Yeah.
after.
I think, yeah. I mean, most of the metrics on the healthcare side are like, are they breastfeeding and did they breastfeed through the first year? You know, not necessarily exclusive because there's some kids that need.
Right. There is some evidence certainly for longevity of breastfeeding, which the national measure gets at.
Yeah.
But that's different than exclusive. So we already have an exclusive measure of that in the early years. I'm not an expert in this, so I defer to OHA, but I do believe that there's more evidence from my limited knowledge for something more like the national measure.
Yeah, and the CRAMS question as it worded is kind of a duration question too, because it says you want to know the first time he drank liquids, but instead of could still be you could still be breastfeeding, but
right,
also
that's the end of. So there's a difference between the end of exclusive and the duration of including breastfeeding.
Yes,
that's the difference, really.
Right. I mean, I would defer to OHA in terms of which one is the more important indicator of good. Right?
I think so too.
I'm pretty sure that they're not recommending that the child not have any other liquids after 6 months. Anyway.
Well, sorry, this is Beth. I'm just going to jump. Hey, it's Beth. I'm just going to jump in really quick as a former birth and postpartum doula, just because this was somewhat in my realm. But that's also a tricky question just because sometimes, new mothers are supplementing with formula while they get their milk supply established, but it doesn't, once it comes in, then they exclusively breastfeed for however length of time. And so I think that could be a problematic item in that way as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like your committee.
My committee?
Your committee, this meeting, OHA.
Yeah, I'll follow up with OHA.
Pediatrics used to be breastfeeding till 1, but not exclusive.
Yeah, it's the exclusive. I mean,
Sarah was really kind of set on the exclusive, and I'm not sure why. I'll touch base.
That makes a good point, though.
Yeah, best.
I don't know.
For mothers who aren't able to, or.
Okay.
Well, I will follow up and do some more.
I think that also gets in with preterm deliveries or children that are in NICU and they're not able to breastfeed, but then when they're released from NICU, they are, and they do, they pump, and so there's formula that's introduced at that time, and they make it depends. I mean, there's a lot of variables for that one.
I think you have a rich set of things to discuss in your committee.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, this is Deb. Sorry to join you all late. I had another meeting, and I do not want to derail this at all, but someone just sent me as I'm on my computer here, and I know I requested this, and I finally just got it. And I'm just going to throw this out there, and I'm going to then go on mute. It doesn't have to be anything, but I was just wondering, seemed to apply to this group, the 0 to 3s State of Babies yearbook, and we have a specific pullout for the state of Oregon's babies, and it has a lot of indicators that somehow must be being tracked. Have we looked at that at all as far as this group because maybe some of the things we're talking about can be pulled or somehow they're being pulled out. Is that familiar with anyone?
I guess they're using NSDH data.
Yeah, I don't know. What was the source you were talking about?
It's actually, yeah. And I can forward it to, who's the best person to forward to it? Well, I'll just do it to the whole committee. And again, if that's something that's of value, I don't want to derail this rich conversation here, but wanted to let you know I was on, and someone had just now sent this to me. So I'll just forward this on, and if it's helpful, great. If not, no problem, but I'll just keep listening in.
Okay, can you introduce yourself though before, because you're showing up as caller 4 on our screen.
Okay, and I wanted to be caller 3. This is Debbie Jones, and I'm representing Four Rivers Early Learning Hub out in Eastern Oregon.
Welcome, Debbie. Thank you. Okay.
Okay. This is a long-term measure for Goal 1, frequency of reading to kids. Current params, how many days in a typical week you or someone in your household read a book or story. And then the scale, you just fill in 0 to 7. And that's compared to during the past week, how many days did you or other family members read to the child? And that has 4 groupings, 4 options, none, 1 to 3 days, 4 to 6 days, or every day. So it seems like the greater specificity, the better, I would say, rather than
the typical week in case, it seems like a positive addition to a survey question, because that's more relevant than something that could have been happening in that particular week. So that seems good.
That's the wording we use in our kindergarten parent survey too. And
Is the same one as
it's not the number of days it's categorized, but I think it's typical week.
Oh, the typical week. Okay.
And how do we feel about just reading versus reading, singing, and sometimes it's just reading?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's reading.
That's where my mind was going first, was the culturally responsive conversation that we had when we first looked at params 2, and I recall us as a committee being disappointed that we only had reading because we wanted to be more inclusive in terms of early language use.
I think if we want to ask others, I think it's important. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt Shannon, sorry.
That's fine, yeah. Add it as another question, perhaps.
Yeah. You don't want to throw away the
I agree. I would agree with that, yep. The other piece that stands out to me in here is the difference between household and family member. So as a mom of a child who was raised in 2 households, if I answered number 41, I would think about my specific household, which is 60% of my child's experience. Whereas the other, I would include my child's other family members, which is important distinction for us.
So the more inclusive would be to call them family members and not worry how they define household. Is that?
Well, I mean, in many regards, yes. I think for divorced or separated families, that's absolutely true. There are some situations in which kids are living with someone who's not a family member who may also read to them, and we would miss that. So it's different. It seems, my impression is that perhaps family members maybe captures more of it. But I'm curious what others think about that.
I like family just in the sense that it's a close, you might think it's a closer relationship. It's a more important. It's a loaded word, but I'm not sure.
I don't know about family members, because if you're a working mom and you have a nanny all day and your nanny's working, reading to your child, you would want to report that, right?
Yeah.
But
I don't know. Would we though? Because that's similar to an out-of-home child care provider too in many ways. So that gets at what are we looking for? Is it parent reading? Is it being read to as a child?
Child trends data book. Parent to report.
Okay, this was supposed to be the easy part. Oh, now we get down to these little things.
I would say we stick with the wording of the whatever indicators get tracked at a national level. Like I'm thinking of, I know we always use the Child Trends Kids Data Book, and that's the language that we've used for Healthy Families and Parent Survey. And it may not be reflecting, no one item is ever going to reflect all this complexity, but we want to have something that's comparable to other measures, right? I mean, that's my perspective. I could be wrong. And not like making up our own questions.
Do you have that book?
Hmm?
Do you have the Child Friends
I'm sure I do.
data book? I mean, I think it's sitting on my shelf, and I could give it to you.
It's online. And all maps are all those graphs.
As Beth is bringing that up, and this is not something to necessarily solve right now, but it's just a question, Tom, as you're getting that group together, is who do we have on that subcommittee or whoever is making decisions about PRAMS 3, who's really bringing a very strong equity lens to it. I hear you, Beth, and not wanting to come up with our own questions, but we also have a really big opportunity to be better and to really have questions that capture what we're trying to capture for the diversity of our families in Oregon. So I would argue that we should entertain that.
Kendra would probably say yes to joining your group.
I just want to clarify, because I didn't think I was agreeing to be on an ongoing work group around PRAMS. I thought I was coming to one meeting and
I thought it was one meeting.
Yeah.
But I was just saying, that's Kendra's expertise, and if you're going to join somebody, I think she's anxious to contribute. So I would just. It's one meeting. I just want
to clarify, like, do we have a committee with OHA?
I wouldn't call it a committee.
No. I feel like they said one. Yeah. But they're deciding, right? Are we the deciders or they're
they're the deciders,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
They're
Whether they want to put together another committee or just meet with us once, I'm not sure.
Oh, I see. Okay. Okay.
Okay. Well, we'll hold off on these. Tobacco use, this is one we haven't really talked about much. It's under Objective 7 in our grid. Because we have, right now I just had put in a placeholder, tobacco and or alcohol use during pregnancy. Now we can either, there's a couple decisions here. Whether we're looking at both tobacco and alcohol use or just one of them. And at what time period we could use PRAMS data for whether it's at pregnancy. We can use PRAMS, the follow-up PRAMS, and look at the first 2 years or first 3 years of life.
I just have a question. Do people, does social desirability on this question is obviously very high. How reliable are responses on these questions? Does anybody know that? I mean, boy, there's a lot of temptation.
Are you talking about PRAMS or NSETCH?
I was talking about PRAMS, but go ahead and answer it for the national. I'm
it's one of the
curious.
biggest problems I have with a lot of the things that they added around kindergarten readiness and others. I'm like, did any parent actually cognitive test? So when I was part of National Survey, we would do cognitive testing, but we wouldn't do validity checking, if that makes sense. So like when you're asking about the validity, we would do cognitive testing to know, did this make sense? Did people understand the wording? And the funding for that has gone down a bit. And so I think your concerns about it, Bobby, if you have face validity concerns, I think they're important to acknowledge the kind of strength of the data and how it's collected, but also potential limitations and that it may be a best worst case scenario.
Can I defer to I thought smoking during pregnancy was indicated in the vital records, but I could be wrong. I don't know.
I thought there was something.
They'll know the best way. I feel like they'll know the best way to measure that if smoking during pregnancy is what is important. Different, again, than smoking during the first 2 years.
Do we want to
This is under parents and caregivers have equitable access to support for their physical and social emotional health. I'm not sure how this is a measure of that.
In a week. And so that was seem to be.
Well, some of these I don't think line up necessarily.
I think Emily's trying to say something.
Oh, Emily, were you talking to the group?
And I remember learning that that screening tool came from McVie at the time. Also, going back to the reading, the percentage of families reading, what Healthy Families looks at, I just pulled that paperwork out. What it looks at is the percent of families who read to their children or sing songs 3 times or more. And it does use the same language. Both McVie and Healthy Families use the same language that you were referencing that in the program.
Okay, so the reading is a population level, so it's not a subpopulation. Right. But for these intermediary measures, we are talking about for subpopulations, but
yeah, and if we really go through and look at every one and whether it really fits the objective, perfectly well, they're not going to. I think there are a lot of measures that could be moved around, could go in different places, or they just don't really actually fit there, but they're one we established earlier, so we didn't want to take them off there.
So the idea is, if parents and caregivers have equitable access to support for their physical health, then tobacco smoking is reduced. Right? That's the logic.
Yep. We're concerned mostly with tobacco use, is that right? I don't think so far. Kick it to the health experts. Kick these all to the health experts.
I guess because
I mean, if you think of social desirability on tobacco, alcohol.
Still 6% of the people say yes.
I know.
I'm just trying to think of the usefulness of it as a measure, period.
Although you're tracking it over time, this is how I would think about it, right? So you have the same level of social desirability at every time point, right? So you're just using it as a proxy, right, at some level. So whether or not if 6% of people say they smoke, if that's actually valid and correct, is not so much a concern at one level as what it looks like over time for this purpose, I think.
I think if we're talking about this is Debbie, our goal of healthy and stable families, that has a whole lot to do with the healthy part of it.
Seems like this is Alicia, it seems like it also depends on whether we're interested in impacts on the child's health or overall family health or the mother's health. Because when I read the NSCH measure about people smoking in the household, to me that brings to mind mostly secondhand smoke for the child and their development in the first years. Whereas when I think about smoking during pregnancy, it's about prenatal development of the child. But smoking on the PRAMS-2 measure for the person or the parent reporting seems mostly about the health of that person or parent.
Yeah, it doesn't reference the child at all.
I mean, if we thought it should be about the child, we could move it to objective 4, for instance. If we wanted it to be about the child rather than the parent. So I think that's a good question.
Yeah, I think we'd be more interested in the impact on the child, right? Because if a person smokes 20 to 40 cigarettes and whatever a day, that's not good. But if they always do it outside and they're never around the child at all, it's different.
Okay, then I think the national measure that's broader than the parent, if it's about the child, I think your point that whether it's mom or grandma who's smoking, the child's getting secondhand smoke. Because grandma lives with you. I don't know. So, yeah, and then again, I'd move this to 4. Because I don't think it's about the mom anymore. And help me on alcohol. What is it that we are wanting to change? Getting young parents, this is after the baby's born. So we all know about no alcohol while you're pregnant, and I think that's a vital record question. But if we're talking about after the baby's born, are we saying we want to change mom's drinking after the baby's born?
Yeah, so weird way. During pregnancy seems like a clear indicator related to child health.
Yes.
Alcohol use during the child's first 2 years, I mean, probably a lot of people.
Especially if they're changing it to 3 years.
Yeah, right? So a substance abuse would be a different indicator, but that's not what's here.
It's kind of a mix of impact on the mother's health or a very rough proxy for home environment.
Well, and this is Debbie again, and I'm looking on a site right now. This is from the Baby Center, and it talks about, during the first 4 hours after breastfeeding, a mother consumes alcohol beverage, and so they really try and encourage mothers who are breastfeeding not to consume alcohol, at least for the baby's first 3 months. So, I don't know if we're in that small of an area, but that alcohol and breastfeeding is kind of something that they're trying to get mothers to stay away from.
Also, it seems like, too, if you're thinking about substance abuse, you probably want to think about both parents and not just the mother. Mm-hmm. And these are really geared toward your behavior.
Any other thoughts on tobacco?
Well, it's unclear to me what our goal is. I mean, what would be progress that parents, whether we're talking about all the adults in the household or we're talking about the mother, once you get past the baby being born, are we hoping that they'll never drink? I mean, I'm just not clear what would be progress. What are we trying to measure?
Yeah, I think it's problematic, especially when you try to group the number of drinks per week into some kind of problem statement or something. I mean, it sounds to me like we're primarily interested in the impact on the child. I mean, we do have some mother's health issues in here, or items in here. And that cigarette smoking is probably has a bigger impact. I don't know if you can really compare them. Is more of a concern during pregnancy than drinking? Is that too?
Both during pregnancy.
And they're both really important.
Pregnancy is after the child's born.
Where we focus on tobacco and we say, did you smoke during pregnancy? Is there smoking in the household with the child or something?
I think, I mean, you can find out with OHA, but if it's during pregnancy, I think vital statistics probably has a source, and that's a whole population. Mm-hmm. But if it's what did they do when they brought the baby home, then PRAMs and PRAMs 2.
So
PRAMs 3.
The fact that it's under Objective 7, parents and caregivers having equitable access to supports for their physical and social and emotional health, makes me think about it being here makes me think that there's almost like a presupposition that there's problematic use. And so movement on this would be about assistance and equitable access to support for people who have problematic use. And so that makes me think about like receiving behavioral health services or some type of, having some type of diagnostic, not necessarily about how much they're drinking, but for people for whom there is problem use. Or likewise with tobacco, for people who want to stop.
Yeah, and there are a number of measures, at least specific programs, where they ask, they have measures, what percentage of mothers who were diagnosed with depression received treatment. It's that received treatment part, whether it's intimate violence who got treatment or drug abuse who got treatment, but we've never included and got treatment for whatever reason. I'm not sure if those measures are, they're not well developed within OHA or don't exist within OHA or what.
Do you feel you have enough for your conversation, or that we should keep talking about it?
Well, yeah, there's enough for conversation, definitely. I guess, yeah, just come back with the information of the group.
I'd be really interested in what it is we're trying to do. Are we trying to get parents to quit drinking? Are we trying to...
Stop smoking during pregnancy.
Well, this isn't during pregnancy. This is, well, and not smoking when kids are home. That one's really clear because secondhand smoke damage is so huge. But the drinking, it's just less clear to me what the policy is.
This is Debbie. You know, the more I listen to this, if I can chip in real quick, I think, and I don't know who's questioning whether, you know, how do we get to it? The more I'm listening, I agree that, you know, maybe really this 0 to 5, it would be difficult to find that and then to make sure it's matching up, and then so we're not coming out like the prohibition police. So even though this is really, I mean, my expertise in this whole thing is the substance use, and so as I'm listening, I really feel like, yeah, if we could get the tobacco one, seems like a pretty important one, and maybe, you know, during pregnancy. But I agree, it's probably going to be difficult and could keep following and having consistent outcome measurements. Even though that's my passion, I agree that it would probably be difficult for it to be something a valid outcome measure for us.
Okay, ready to move on to some of the last 3 questions?
Okay. Well, maternal depression is the next one, right?
Maternal depression.
This says maternal social support on the library, and here are the measures. Well, on my copy of the library, this. It says...
And social support's coming up.
Oh, okay. So maternal depression isn't on here yet, is it?
It is a, yeah, long-term.
On the long term, okay. I mean, it's one, boy, there's tons of research to say this one's important.
Yeah, and I would just say they should use the one that's being used for, which I think might be this. This is the P, well, that's PHQ too.
Yeah, we'll have to talk to them about the measure these.
For alignment sake.
Okay, well, that was easy.
That was easy. Okay, stress. Family stress, maternal stress, however. And this we would probably just, I don't know, add up and come up with a severe risk stress score.
I would assume that these are, I would assume, but we should confirm that these are standardized measures of stressful life events. And these look like them. They look like 2 different versions.
What seems important to me is that there's a research base to say that these accurately capture the stressors that are associated with family problems, negative child outcome.
And it also seems like a few different things. The maternal stress is about the stress that the mother is or caregiver is having, whereas family stress is about events that may be perceived as ACEs for the child, or and so those are both seem important, but different.
Yeah, family stress ones, if you're reporting on what child is exposed to, it's getting more at some of those ACEs questions.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, the strongest would be the research base behind it, whichever.
One is maternal stress, so clearly the mom.
Right.
The other one is the child. I mean, they call it family, but it's really about this child. The 2-year-old.
Yeah, I guess as I think about it, it's a good distinction, the child or the mother. And the child is more like the ACEs, so it's historical. You can't, as a policy perspective, you can't do a whole lot except try to prevent tragedies. Where maternal stress, I think we can actively work on, say, within programs, parenting, education classes, one-on-one home visits. I think this maternal stress might be more relevant to our work, but I'm not. Again, this is just a dashboard. So.
Seems to fit in that objective 7.
It does seem to be the objective better.
Yeah, agreed.
Do we want to take out the child ACEs kind of one as being too extraneous and not actionable? Or do you want to keep it in our library for now?
If we keep it, it's objective 4. It's not.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, I wouldn't say it's not actionable because, I mean, these are all things: domestic violence, violence in the neighborhood, mental illness. Those are things the system should be working on over time, right? So,
yeah.
But I just think they're conceptually.
So, leave it in for now. That's just
Move it to objective 4. Find out if there's a strong research base. Those seem like next step.
Okay. Which brings us to the last one: social-emotional support.
Can I just ask something before you go into
Sure.
that? You know, I assume in the documentation for the national survey that they have the source, the reference source for each of those measures. So that would be good to know.
I mean, what's it based on?
Yeah.
If it's an existing measure? Oh, I've never seen it technically.
To get at to the research base.
It's gotta be.
Yeah, if they.
If it's, I don't know if it's on the website, but I can try to find that somewhere. Yeah.
Well, on this one, I mean, we've used social emotional support measures. The one that Julie Henley had tested. I think it's fine as long as these have been tested and have been found to accurately measure.
Yeah, the NSDH one is dubious to me. I mean, it's been a few years now, but I did a really comprehensive review of social support measures 5 years ago. And the research suggests that the first question is the important one during the past 12 months. Is there someone you could turn to? Now, this one's asked specifically about parenting, which we might want to know. But then the types of support are actually less important. Do you have someone, and how many someone? Essentially. So in that sense, the PRAMS 2 measure would get my vote of these 2.
It's much closer to the one Julie has tested. Yeah,
Yeah, that's a good question.
just on face validity, the PRAM's one. But, and in addition, it's very close, it's very close to the one Julie Henley has tested.
Okay. All right, so we've finished up those comparisons. Are there any PRAM data that would give us insight into whether we think it's an acceptable measure or not? Do you want me to go back and look at previous years for any reason?
Look at distributions.
Distributions, right? And I don't know if there's any other checks on the data.
Well, all of these questions, I mean, everything we look at, we're going to look at how well it breaks out ethnic groups.
Not in,
It's not going to. We know it can't.
The standards can't do it.
yeah,
Okay.
unless we do a significant expansion. I think what we need to do is get all the agencies together and pool on a couple population based over time, like we talked about.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Nothing comes to mind regarding data analyses that you might be interested in? Smart. Okay.
Anything that
Do we want to move on to any other measures, discussions, or?
well, I can give you an update. Beth and Shannon and I haven't met, but I think it'd be interesting to hear people's thoughts on these are the workforce measures, and that the education can be captured either in degrees or in steps in the Oregon registry, and there's advantages and disadvantages to both. And so I thought it'd be good if we heard, before we met, if the three of us heard what people's thoughts were. The advantage of steps is you can earn them with training and credentials. It can be combined with coursework and so more people can have a step than have a degree, and it's early learning focused. Whereas degrees are in any field, and they're certainly they're less they're less common for people in certain positions, and but I think what degrees have going for them is they communicate and steps don't, except that you could say step A, which is equivalent, isn't it equivalent to a BA? I was going to look this up because I always forget.
10 or 10 and a half.
Is a BA. Oh, so then 8 must be the AA. Okay. Well, whatever. You can say step 7, which is equivalent to, so you can get some of the, so it's not either or. But anyway, I thought it'd be helpful for the three of us if people shared thoughts on measuring education and training or steps. Or
I think the steps are really important. I think we need to be inclusive, just for various life experiences and what have you. I guess my question would be, do we lump it all in, like some staff have suggested, make it a measure of a BA or step 10 or higher? And like they're equivalent, because we make this equivalency of 10 steps equals a BA or something. And either of those allows you to do more in a classroom. And there's breaks at 7.5, at an AA degree, I think, and step 7 or 7.5. And then once you get to a BA or step 10.5, then you can be a full-fledged teacher, I believe.
well, you can be a teacher in Oregon
At any
by being alive and having worked.
Childcare.
Yeah, and having worked for so many months.
Depends on
So many months in the center, being breathing is enough to make you a teacher.
I know some of them, yeah.
Would the step 10 would capture if they did have a BA in early childhood or a related field, but a BA, going by degree wouldn't capture if it's early childhood or related. So I would lean towards the STEP, because then you're getting that population that has done the coursework and a combination of trainings and other things, plus those that have a BA that is specific to early childhood. But if you just look at degree, it could be a degree in anything.
Okay, so I heard a strong preference for STEP.
I know one question that has come up with like district funded pre-K is a lot of their teachers have BAs, but they're not STEP. Right? Isn't that right? Yeah. So that would mean they wouldn't.
Well, okay.
I know.
If they sign up in the Oregon registry, then they would have a STEP. But if you're talking about the ones who are not in the registry, then, but it's a relatively small number.
Yeah, I mean,
if we're talking about the whole workforce.
Yeah.
I can't remember. I'd have to pull the report to see.
Yeah, I wasn't sure what
the way Michaela had done the data now, step greater than 9, so that's the equivalent to the BA. I mean, that was one. She did categories. She'll do whatever we decide, but what she's done in the past is categories like 7 to 9 and greater than 9. And just for what it's worth, amongst directors, 38% have greater than a 9, head teachers 31%, teachers only 11, and providers 18, and the big homes and only 3%. So I don't think we would want to go with only the higher steps, because, but 7 to 9 you get, actually we'd have her doing it differently. I think we'd say 7 or higher, because,
or track both, right?
Or track both.
A 9 or higher.
Yeah, we could do that too.
The step and the more aspirational.
And I think we probably want to be clear in the position, because it makes a difference of what the requirements for that position were.
Rather than the whole workforce.
Because we want to know if they're making the progression from assistant with a associate's degree level to teacher and director with bachelor degree level or equivalent step.
Well, I mean, typically we report teacher.
Okay.
And include both the teacher and the head teacher in the category, because theoretically the teacher is setting the standards for that group of children. And I think if we do multiple positions, but the question then, what do we do about home-based? And home-based is always lower. And you can't combine them with teachers anyway. They're just, but if we put them both in, the home-based are always going to look bad, because they're way behind, especially the small home-based. The large home-based don't look that different than teachers, but sometimes they're even stronger. But it's the small home-based providers, their education levels and training levels are both really low.
But so do we have the goal of trying to lift up the training levels of those home-based providers? I mean, if yes, then they're part of the workforce. Should be included, maybe. Understanding that they're low.
So, I mean, we could do
We'll look
step
forward to
level.
your recommendation.
Okay. We'll come back. Thank you. All of this was helpful.
Did you want to discuss that more?
No.
I didn't mean to shut
This
you
was
down.
really helpful, though, because these are hard calls to make.
Yeah, this is confusing.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe we can knock out a couple things here that have been sitting for a while. Last time in the hacker measures, there was discussion of the well-child visits as part of their bundle they were going to recommend for CCO incentive metrics. And I believe that age group was 3 to 6 before we looked at first 15 months of life. Do we want to be consistent with what they're recommending? Which seems like it would be a good idea. Do we want to do both time periods? I mean, there's a lot of different ways you can slice and dice well-child visits. You can look at the number of visits, the percentage that had a certain number of visits, and then you have the different age groups. So,
what's the metric that they're looking at again? Is 3 to 6?
3 to 6.
Oh, well, I mean, my feeling would be that we would want to include them for 0 to 3. Around
First 15 months, I think.
We certainly want, I mean, well-child visits are highest for 0 to 3.
Right.
They're much lower for 3 to 6-year-olds who are a pretty healthy little group.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I don't know, put both in now, and as we whittle them down,
Do that.
but for sure we've got to have 0 to 3, because that really differentiates
Okay.
what kids are being supported. So,
Try to go with both or leave both on for a while. Preventive dental exams, the only thing I know about that is that that was also discussed last time, and it was for 1 to 5-year-olds, which seems like a good measure.
and isn't that going to be one that's coming, that we won't have now?
I think coming next year, no, I think it's one of the two that they said were established, I thought. Well-child and preventive dental exams were existing measures, but I'm not sure. Anyway.
It sounds like Colleen's off.
Must be,
Yeah, she left it too.
Okay.
So we're okay with that. One thing we haven't talked about a lot about is immunization rates. We haven't talked about it at all.
Very timely right now.
Yeah. Whether we want to include that as a measure at all.
So OHA has it for whom? Because immunization rates for the whole population?
This is where I get a little,
Alert.
there's alert, right, which is statewide, I think, is probably the big database.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are also measures, I found somewhere, the immunization rates for preschoolers and as well as K-12. Although anytime there's a measure out there that they say is talking about preschoolers in general, I'm very suspect given all the different sites and locations where preschoolers are located.
Well, the ones that I've seen on the health department website, I mean, this is for healthy families that want to go 0 to 3, is fully immunized at age 2. That's an indicator that the state has tracked historically. And they
that
have that comes from alert.
So we can have it on everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Well, why don't we do that then?
Theoretically, everybody, right?
I mean,
Private
that's
healthcare
a
providers.
really critical age
Yeah.
to have
Right.
them by 2.
And it's very complicated how they figure out fully immunized, but then they come up with that indicator.
I've seen those charts, and it's
Yeah.
a lot of letters, plus,
Yeah.
for all the different shots.
Yeah. It becomes challenging what we're hearing from parents within our region for those that are on alternative immunization schedules because they don't get captured in that. So the rates look much lower even if they bring all of their immunizations and have them up to date before preschool entry or even kindergarten entry. So I know there's also the statewide exclusion day for preschools that they have to report on, and it's something at LBCC we track every child that's enrolled in one of our co-op preschools. And
But that's missing most of the kids, because
Yeah,
only
most of
about
them.
a third of them are in preschool.
I mean, at kindergarten entry would be the other point where you get pretty much everybody around exclusionary days. But I would want to have both though for us, because
I would think look at both would be the ideal
So
because
0 to 2 and kindergarten entry?
in kindergarten.
they might have another one at an older age. I only look at 0 to 2 for healthy families. They don't have 3.
Because then you would at least have the possibility of looking at, for those that were on alternative schedules where they caught up by kindergarten entry.
Okay, sounds like enough.
And that this one hopefully gets broken down by subgroups or region or something, because there's so much
County
variation.
for sure.
That might be
I
enough.
would hope they'd have it by race.
By race. I mean, there's certain
Population
communities
data, so it should
where
be.
the culture is just to not get a whole, I mean, all this is in the
Including-
press right now.
Great.
Okay, let's see, if we switched, go over to goal 2 on the back sheet, on the back side. And we're reviewing measures in red that, let's see, we talked about maternal depression, we talked about tobacco and alcohol use, social support, and stress. Family sense of hope is one that I know a lot of people gravitated towards interesting, but whether wasn't sure about the development of that measure or.
It's going to be DHS population.
Yeah, it would be people that had been, I think, in a self-sufficiency service. So it's not, yeah.
So it'd be SNAP, TANF.
Yeah, I think they're going to be sampling from people that were in any self-sufficiency programs. So mainly SNAP would be the biggest portion of people. And then I'm not sure about the launch date on that, but it is a key performance metric that they're going to be tracking.
The sense of hope?
I don't know. I mean, to see if we're making progress on something like that seems really important.
I'd love it if we, I want to see the measure.
I'll see it too.
Okay, yeah, we all are really positive.
Yeah.
So you said this is in development or developed and being rolled out?
But I'm not sure, yeah, what they're thinking about the launch date, but I can check on that.
Okay, great.
Is it for the family assessment tool? Is the
The note on
stress,
it.
are they?
So there is an element in the family assessment tool, but also I think more generally as a key performance metric, because the family assessment tool is only for candidates.
Oh, I thought it was for all. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think ideally, like, eventually they want to move it to be for all. And it was largely informed by the measure, I think, that was on the family.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, I actually brought it today.
Oh, great.
What are the hope items?
It is a little different than I think what they went with for the key performance metric, but let's see if I can find it. Oh, actually, this one might not be in this particular version. Right, so that's actually one that they were going to add in later. So yeah, one reason I thought this is because the social support item maybe would be relevant to the family resident supportive neighborhood, although I think we were also talking about other measures of support. And so is that one already covered?
We'll see a measure of that.
It is for the population, yeah. No, this isn't population necessarily.
Down under objective 9, family lives in a supportive neighborhood.
Question about the neighborhood,
Oh,
or perceived neighborhood support.
And this again is everybody in the self-sufficiency,
So this would just be TANF assessment.
just TANF.
Yeah. Right, so it's not very broad population.
The last 4 on here, 1, 2, 3, 4, we haven't really had extensive conversations about.
Can you get living wage data from the employment office? That's where I would see it.
Yeah, I think.
This came up in DHS too a while back, but they were looking at calculating that based on the Washington economic model.
Yeah, and we've got actually, it's set up to calculate. So I think that would be doable as a quarterly report, because we get in the wage data.
But that would be for,
Right.
again, for self-sufficiency
Right.
participants.
So could we get it, if we wanted to, for universal from the, I mean, that's what they have, right, wage data? The employment
I don't know if they do it in
calculate
terms
living
of a
wage.
living
Right, I don't know
wage
either.
though, because that's a more,
It's more-
that's not straight,
Right. No, I agreed.
because it has to, you have to
Like where
take
they live.
other
But they might.
factors in.
They might, it'd be worth asking.
And now with, I don't know, with the regional minimum wage, everything you go to measure now at the Oregon that has to do with low-income families, it's like, do you have to do everything for it to have meaning? And it gets, it's diverging, every year, the amount of divergence across regions is greater.
DHS must consider that, right? I wonder, living wage.
But if we were gonna see for the whole population, we would want to find if there's anything that implies. But I don't know. I just bet they don't. But because that would be for the whole population.
So what is
But
their census data by region?
Depends what region. And if we're talking about families with young children, just how small the pie gets. And how many years you want to look over.
You can certainly do household income of families with children under 18.
Right. Well, yeah, that's the first one, right? Young children in poverty.
And you can do that one.
Data.
But living wage is a much more qualitative measure than straight.
Oh. It's worth asking them.
So you're going to do it, DHS is going to do it for what population?
It would be people who had received, I think, self-sufficiency services. I'm not sure, maybe any DHS service, but I think probably just self-sufficiency.
And you're going to turn the wages into some qualitative measure?
So I guess based on, I think the work that was started in Washington, you can get just the download of all what a family would have to be making to meet the living wage standards. So basically just taking that information and then comparing it with what the actual wages are for a family and seeing if, people meet that. So I was wondering if you could get census information by region. I don't know much about census data, but you could go that route and then compare it to what is the living wage for that region. This is the percentiles of the income for a region. But look more into that.
Tom, that would then be something you'd have to calculate, which would be, regions is hard, counties is easy to get off of ACS. But regions,
counties are available because we're too small.
Household income?
Oh, for household income under 86.
Oh, okay. Yeah, then.
A handful. I mean, they're the frontier ones.
The household income for families with kids under 18.
That one
is big enough, I think.
It says on the table.
Have you looked at the ALICE report that comes out from United Way? They have a lot of employment and poverty rates, and it's broken down by families with children, and they have it by regions and for the entire state of Oregon.
What source is it again?
ALICE report.
I wonder what their data sources are, because that would be amazing.
I have it.
To see what they're doing.
Yeah, I could send that to the group. I could share it with the group. This is best. And I know it was 2016 data that was just reported this last year, and then they'll do it again in 2020 with 2018 data. But I'm happy to share that report. Christy, you have it as well.
Yeah, I have it pulled up on my phone right now. I was looking to see if it had some of the information that we're discussing, and was seeing quite a few things on here that would be beneficial for this.
Yeah.
So the remaining measures, children in foster care get a timely health assessment. I know that's a measure that OHA looks at. We don't have a lot of foster care measures. We have the rate of abuse and neglect. But we don't have anything else regarding child welfare. And whether that's something we want to consider including. This is objective 9.
Children in foster care get timely health assessment, and OHA already captures that? So
Yeah.
they can just report it?
I think so.
It's probably not foster care under age 6, though.
No.
Probably not.
There are
That's
some
okay.
specific measures around timeframes for when children have to get health assessments that are under age 3 that OHA and DHS monitor.
Something to follow up on, or do we want, I mean, we've never had a discussion of whether it should even be in the dashboard, so.
Well, it's an important group of children.
I just wonder about calling out that specific group, though.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I'm just wondering, since we don't call out a lot of other specific groups that might be to pay attention to. We're trying to keep it seems like, at a higher level.
Yeah, we could switch it out with any of the, well, there are a lot of foster care measures we could look at, or just.
But she's raising the question
okay,
of
but
whether we should break out foster kids at all.
Young children who are experiencing adversity have access to coordinated comprehensive service. So foster care population is highly relevant. But right, we don't talk about them. Homeless.
I mean, imagine we could look at something like length of time in foster care for kids under age, but I'm not sure.
Can't look at that. But that doesn't speak to the objective.
No.
Well, the one worded here does.
Yeah. Better.
So the question is, if we break out foster kids, why would we break them out? Probably because there is a measure. But anyway.
Right, exactly.
Homeless kids get an accurate measure of anything about homeless kids.
I mean, I think we could make a case that it's an important subgroup of children who are clearly experiencing a variety of adversities, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you could probably make that case for other groups too.
Who are you thinking, though? I mean, Kate, homeless.
Homeless, children living on reservations, all children who've been abused and neglected. I mean, but I think you can make a valid case. I'm just playing devil's advocate a little bit. Like, is somebody going to say, why did you look at this group and not other groups? It's actually a good indicator to the objective, because it's one that does get it. Are you getting some services for the people who need it, or the kids who need it?
I think this, for OHAs, when they visually presented it, was always under their column of coordinated services.
I don't know.
But whether a health assessment within foster care is, so specific, is too specific, I'm not sure.
For Native children to get a number, it'd have to be Native children on reservations, because the biggest group of Native children are
I wasn't
not
necessarily suggesting that.
Oh, okay.
No, I was just like thinking.
They're not on
No,
reservations,
no.
the big numbers.
Yeah.
All right. So it sounds like we're going to leave that in for this go round.
Okay. Families live in a supportive neighborhood.
That question that you've got is the only place we've heard, right? That measures that? This one, DHS is the only one who's surveying parents on that question, right?
for the family with necessary housing.
Yeah,
So it's on, there's something related to social support on the family assessment, which is only given to TANF participants. And the wording, so they asked them to go from basically 1 to 4. And the lowest option would be, my family needs to feel a lot more support and connection to family, friends, and community. So it's broader than just neighborhood. And then all the way, the highest option would be, my family consistently feels social support from family and community. So yeah, again, this would be.
So that one really goes up above in 7.
I mean, I'd lean towards just scrapping it as a measure, frankly. I think it's those.
I don't know of anybody who asked that on the survey.
You know where it came from, is it showed up as a dashboard measure in the Child and Family Wellbeing group way back when.
And did they give a data source?
No, I looked through all the information. There was no data source.
Oh.
I'm thinking it was that, well, my hunch is it came from a survey somewhere like that, ACS. I don't know if I've run across it.
I don't know. I've never run across it.
I've used a measure of neighborhood support, but I've never seen it on a national survey, but that doesn't mean it's not there.
Do you think it's that important?
No.
Right here, we're leaning towards scrapping it.
Okay.
Is anybody opposed? I like to cut things. Okay. And the number of residents for a kid. We've talked about that. I think we've heard it's important from housing and other folks. They don't know the data source right now.
I might have it for people that have received the adjuster, but that would again be limited.
Is number of residencies the same thing as like mobility? Has the family moved?
I think so.
Yeah, are we talking about
Mobility.
sequential or simultaneous? I mean, because the majority of children of divorce and separation have multiple residences, but it's stable. That's what their life is going to be.
I think the idea is more for mobility and a measure of family upheaval and instability.
I thought that's on the ACS. I feel like I've seen it there. Number of moves in the past year or something similar to that.
We know kindergartners because we could look at ODE data and see how many different schools they went to.
Well, they could
or
move.
addresses.
They could move.
They could move within, yeah. I'm not sure if ODE marks a residence. Well, they have to mark a residence change. Well, they might not keep the residences. That's at the local level, right? Probably.
I doubt that every time a family moves, the
They even
school
tell
is
the school,
updating their records, or yet alone that they're even telling the school. That all the communication's done with pretty much with email now. I mean, home addresses aren't.
Yeah, I wouldn't use that.
I don't think that would be a very reliable measure.
Take a look at the ACS table.
Check and see if ACS has it.
Has the number moved? If that's what we want, that's the indicator.
By age or child?
Oh, that's unlikely.
Whoa.
That's unlikely.
Yeah. Oh.
I bet it's going to be kids
That's
under
unlikely.
18 or
Yeah,
something.
it would be households or. Yeah.
Okay.
So you're going to check on whether ACS has it?
Yeah, and I'll dig around and see if there's anything more.
I'm trying to think. There was, Urban Institute did a paper on stability in children's lives, and Gina Adams was the author. They may have a measure in there. Okay, Tom, I will volunteer to find the Adams paper and see what they're used. Actually, it was a presentation. I'll just email Gina and ask her. Yeah.
So we made it through.
Okay.
First pass.
Woohoo!
Lots of homework. I think you can be thinking of for next go around, unless there are other issues. Like Bobby, this is your meeting.
Take over.
If people can really try to just sit with these measures and think holistically about them. I mean, where are the gaps? What are we missing? Have we overemphasized one area too much at the exclusion of another? Like once we, like, I would suggest, and what I'm going to do is take them out of the objectives, just put them on a piece of paper and look at them as a group without any separations or categories. And
well, in part though, just to, like, thinking about our process to this point, partly driven by what's available.
Yes.
So we may have gaps because there's no data. I'm thinking about some of those early tables of lots of ideas.
Yeah.
Just, I don't know how to keep that in mind while looking.
yeah, and originally
Recommendations, like here's a gap, we know it's a gap, we know there's no data.
yeah,
They should consider.
that's right.
That feels really important,
We
actually.
considered some, like, we wanted to be aspirational in a way, I guess.
Aspirational and realistic at the same time.
Right, this is realistic
And I guess the
aspiration.
one way that's come into being is with OHA and how they're promoting these follow-up to developmental screening and these other data sources we don't have that they're taking action on to get.
Because once this piece of work gets left behind, then it becomes something that gets used, and we stop thinking that way.
Exactly.
So if it's kept in kind of a plan to revisit it, you know, then then it can get added as it's ready.
You know, objective 8 is still completely empty.
And so it's objective regarding supportive transitions.
Maternal social support be under objective 8? I don't know. I think I struggle with that one because I'm like, connections to what? Connections to each other, connections to the infant, connections to services.
Well, okay, so when we talk about creating universal home visiting, I assume that this objective is about making progress. So it's almost like the measure would be something like percent of newborns whose parents were offered, or I'm making this up.
Are we supposed to not have services in here though, like service delivery outcomes?
I know. The more you think about it, like, oh, that would be good to mention.
Well, turn the words around until they, I mean,
especially with the push towards like universal home visiting, right? We want to track that number of people.
And that seems important, but like, these are intermediate outcomes.
I know.
I feel like
we've been over.
We keep looping back, like somewhere we got to track those kinds of things to make sure that the actions that we think are going to get to these outcomes are actually happening.
Well, so there's going to be an implementation plan that hasn't been developed, won't be developed till July.
Right.
And those are going to have that kind of measure.
Okay.
That's not for this.
Okay. So that would be like percentage of families who get a home visit.
Yeah, I just think if we thought, well, if we get creative enough, there is something about being connected, because that's what this one is about, is are families alone, or are they getting help, access to support? So I don't have what we should measure, but there must be something.
That's why I feel like social support is the one that is there. It's like if a mother doesn't feel socially isolated, for measure of social support, however we're measuring it, is good.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
There is a measurement tool that's used in the Family Connects model that for the universal home visiting that would get to some of these connection pieces that as that universal home visiting rolls out would get us what we should look at as that is rolling out.
What would happening?
Is what would
happening for families?
Yeah, or what are the questions that they're asking? Because that becomes an almost universal population. Everyone who opts into the voluntary home visiting is getting this screening, and there are questions on that screening. I have it. I can take a look at it and see what the screening tool is and what questions they're asked and what we might be able to add as that rolls out.
Okay. I'll
I'll follow up on that.
If nothing else, even if it isn't data they collect, but it would be the constructs. What should be different for a family who is supported? So anyway, so the constructs may be embedded in the tool. So when you're looking at it, it's not just would we have a measure of it, but are we getting the right ideas, whether we have measures or not? So a higher level than did they get a service? It's like we care that they get a service because we think something positive is going to happen. Right? And that positive is going to happen is the piece. Well, I have no idea if anybody's measuring it. But the first step is to figure out what it is. But I like moving maternal social support down.
Yeah, it's the entire population.
The transition one is tough.
Okay. It'll be interesting.
Just at 6.
Yeah.
Because you're either in, I mean, there's no data.
This was really, were we talking whether you could get it out of the, just for the kindergarten, even that with population?
The only thing I can think of is how many preschoolers get an IEP meeting before kindergarten, but I think that's, and it's such a small population.
This is something that we're exploring at the hub level as well, and coordinated enrollment, but it hasn't been put on our task completely, but it's
plan for a year from now.
Yeah, it's a possibility there that we might have some hub level data around that.
We'll be looking at it in PDG, right?
Right, and part of the, the parent survey potentially.
So there, I think there's, if we had it on our radar screen, that we needed a mechanism here, you know, that could tie that together.
So there's two, am I correct that there's two ideas, constructs embedded and objective 6? Maybe we can pull them out. One is the transition from early childhood into K-12, but the other one is while you're in early childhood, were your service, to what extent were services coordinated? So there's two things here that we should be thinking of separately.
Definitely separate.
Isn't there something they're looking at with ERDC around this too, and continuity of services for children?
That's your
Continuity
Continuity of care, and it's a measure. I don't think of it as this. It's
actually up there in objective 2.
a measure of, on average, how long do children stay in the ERDC program, or on average, how long do they stay with the same provider? Those are the two measures. We do have
kind of, it's actually
we've got that. We've got
related
that
to
in objective 2.
Yeah.
It's already in here in objective.
Okay.
You could put it under objective 6. It's the closest thing we have, honestly.
Continuity of services across early care and education.
Yeah, but it's not across. That's just within. It's just within that.
But it's within childcare.
Within ERDC. No, it's only for the kids who receive ERDC.
This also seems like a question for Colleen as well, that because she's working on this so much, that if she has any ideas about what, again, thinking aspirationally or thinking out a year or two, what would she project could be a potential measure?
Okay.
These are some ideas. Okay. Well, we've only got 10 minutes, so that's not really time to start on criteria. Do you want, so you gave us homework to review existing measures. We could use the 3 perspectives that you came up with for. Ages, developmental stage, sector, and strategic plan. So, and Tom's already started that in the slides. So we could review. You were saying, your idea of the review, what, say again, what you had in mind that we would do in reviewing? We're looking for gaps.
I know. I said something and then I forgot it. And then I was going to add to it, but then I forgot it again. So I will come up with it. I will
you'll
regenerate whatever
and
I
you'll put in
think.
the minutes what our homework is.
Yes.
What you hope
Yes.
we do.
I want to, I'll think about it.
I'm trying to jog your brain a little bit, because I think I remember at least you were saying you were going to take it out of here and sort of look at it in terms of artwork instead of, and think about it and see where the gaps are. And then, oops, I just forgot the second part too. Anyway.
Well, I envisioned you like cutting them up in little pieces and doing all kinds of sorts. That's what, when you said it, it was like, I wonder if he's going to have a bunch of little pieces. And
Oh, no, I don't have interactive anything ever. Just sit around the table and talk. I am not creative with little work of things like that.
Okay, you tell us.
But I will.
You had in mind.
Yeah, I'll come up with some key questions to consider for next meeting.
Okay, and then we did not start working, well, maybe this isn't what you meant. The criteria we'll use for actually selecting the measures? Is that?
We were going to revisit the criteria.
Okay.
And then we were going to go through the measures and see if they actually fit.
Okay.
You said they should.
Good idea. Okay, so that will be also. So we'll get the homework, and then we'll be, I mean, it takes a long time, all the work you do in between to bring us up to speed. So we'll do that first, and then the homework, and then applying the criteria or reviewing the criteria to be sure they're the right ones for selection. At some point, we also have to decide, well, maybe this isn't our decision, how many.
Well, that brings up a point where we're going to get to the point where do we really want to spend a lot of time carrying these down to a nice manageable set, or we know the ELC is going to mess with them. So
just leave them alone.
Or give them a bigger pool to choose from.
Okay. So we won't be doing the narrowing.
I don't know. That's a question for the group.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. ELC is going to want to be able to put their fingerprints on it.
Hopefully just their fingerprints. Don't let them roll up their sleeves. So I do not want to say that.
To build the story of how we got to here, so that they can see. Right?
Yeah. That when we started.
I know, I really should sit down and document this whole thing, because it goes back to work 4 years ago.
Okay. All right. So, April, whatever it is, 3rd? April 3rd.
And, does anybody recall when Holly said she would be back?
Beth?
I thought she was taking 3 months.
She'll be back April. Holly will be back April 1st, but she's just coming back half-time for a few months. I think she's planning on coming back full-time around the 1st of 2020. So she'll be working sort of half-time, part-time through the rest of this year. But she'll be back in the office April 1st, which is coming right up.
Well, do we have any
sure
early learner photos to share with the group?
I got one when he was first born.
I think we don't have to put her under any pressure, but it's her decision when she wants to
I was
become
just
chair.
curious, and as long as give you an idea,
yeah.
You'll be cheering for.
I'm still on the committee, so it doesn't change a whole lot. And I want her to come back because I love the way she chairs the meeting, but. Okay, we are adjourned. And Beth, you and I have to come up with dates.
And then,
Oh, I know.
More meetings.